Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, and the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. I'm joined today by Milton. Milton, can you please introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. My name is Milton Bartley. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm the CEO of ImageQuest in Nashville, Tennessee, and we are a security services firm and an advisory services firm. We largely serve regulated companies, mostly community banks and wealth management companies throughout the region.
And you've been working on helping with generative AI adoption and addressing resistance to generative AI adoption. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yes, so we got excited about AI 2.5 years ago when most people learned about, ChatGPT when it became
Hmm.
really famous. And we became early adopters and started trying to
Hmm.
find ways to put it in place in our business, looking for
Hmm.
business use cases where we could either experiment with it or put it into production. And
Hmm.
we've had some successes there. And then about a year ago, we started trying to take that to our clients. And as I said, many of our clients, most frankly, are regulated. So there's
Hmm.
an immediate, oh, wait a minute, what do the regulators think? Are we allowed to do this? What does this even
Hmm.
mean? So it's been a very interesting year, a journey, I would say,
Hmm.
of working with clients, bringing them along, in some cases pulling them, and in some cases trying to keep up with them.
Hmm. So tell me about your own journey. Did you encounter any resistance or challenges internally as you were trying to figure out use cases on top generative AI?
Great question. I would say a little bit of both, frankly. We
Hmm.
have our CIO has been using AI for many years in many different
Hmm.
names, right? Um, Before we all knew AI, we knew things like robotic process automation or workflow automation or just general workflow building.
Hmm.
So he's very familiar with these tools. And so part of what I had to do early on was to pull the reins on him a little bit to make sure we didn't get out over our skis too far
Hmm.
as we were figuring things out. But we're a technology company. There are a little over 50
Hmm.
of us in the company. I would say if I looked at an adoption curve, it's going to look very typical to most bell curves. We've got, 10% of our folks are out there on the front end. They're leading, they're pulling, hey, here's
Hmm.
an idea. Can we use AI for this? They're talking to the
Hmm.
CIO, they're talking to our vendors. 10% are like, that's just not my thing. I'm fine the way I
Hmm.
am. I know how to do my job. I'll
Hmm.
just do it. And then the balance, that 80% in the middle, are they kind of fall across that curve. And those are the ones where we
Hmm.
have a monthly get together as a team and we share best practices and we ask the
Hmm.
team, hey, how are you doing this?
Hmm.
What are you doing with these AI tools we've given you? Because really the best ideas are going to come from the people that do the work.
Hmm. Now, you're telling me that the CIO was getting a little bit over his keys. Tell me a little bit about what you mean and what you did to make sure that things were more aligned.
Sure. So he, like I, is a fast mover. Like it's like from
Hmm.
idea to action happens very quickly. And as a maturing company and serving the client base we serve, we sometimes have to be more thoughtful, involve more
Hmm.
stakeholders in a decision. And so
Hmm.
what would happen is, he'd get an idea, and the next thing you know, he comes in on Monday morning and he's written some code that's doing XYZ against our system. Nothing bad,
Hmm.
but things that possibly others in the team should have had some
Hmm.
thoughtful input to. Maybe our security officer should have even been aware he was doing it. And again, he wasn't doing
Hmm.
it to avoid security. It was just, hey, I've got this idea. Let's see if we can do this. And sure enough,
Hmm.
doing it. But again, probably not in the right order. That's what I mean.
Hmm. Got it. So tell me a little bit about how you set up processes to make sure that generative AI adoption happened in the right order, including not simply the technical side, but the human side.
Yeah, that's very good. So first off, we sat down and we are on our third iteration of this now. We came up with an AI policy, very simple, and
Hmm.
we added it to our user technology policies, which our
Hmm.
company follows and takes seriously. We have 11 policies in this manual that
Hmm.
are user facing, things like password policies, clean desk
Hmm.
policy, you get it. And so we added an AI policy to that, and we try to keep it very
Hmm.
simple. We didn't want to put a bunch of rules and do this, don't do that. It was more of a
Hmm.
framework. And so really the framework said this, use the tools that we give you access to. So we've given them
Hmm.
access to cool tools
Hmm.
around which we know we have security and control. Um, and do anything you want in those tools in the force of doing your job, as long as you're not putting
Mm,
client or company data into those tools, unless
mm,
you have a specific permission for a specific use case. Because again, we can
mm,
build security around most things. So getting that out in front of people, and then again, I think we're on our third iteration of
mm,
that. We've tweaked it over time as we've learned. And then secondarily, we created an AI committee inside of our company.
mhm,
There were 5 or 6 people on the committee at first. And their job was to figure out first, how are we going to use it internally? And
mhm,
second, how are we going to sell it to clients or support clients that want to use AI?
mhm,
That's been going for about a year now, and they meet
mhm,
regularly, have good ideas. And then part of what came out of that, I think I've already mentioned, we do this monthly, you can call it a meetup, you can call it a lunch and learn, although we don't
mhm,
always get lunch, but it's invitation to the entire company, not mandatory, and we get anywhere from 15 to 40 people that will show up for 45
mm,
minutes to an hour once a month, listen to what others are doing, see
mhm,
examples of what others are using the tools to do, and sharing their ideas. Either here's something I've done, or
mhm,
here's something I want to do. Do you think this would work? And we can talk about
mhm,
it. So I think that's how we've really garnered adoption.
mm,
And I've got a couple of folks that are just, I mean, they've figured out some powerhouse use cases inside of our company
mm,
that are, I'm going to say, real game changers from an efficiency standpoint, but not earth shattering. It's not, we're not
mm,
doing anything crazy with data bouncing all over the world to do it. These are just
mm,
took a process that takes me 6 hours and I figured out how to apply some tooling to it. And now I can do it in 2 hours. That's
mm.
real.
That's real. Give me some examples. What are some examples of that improvement?
So a great example is we do a lot of vendor management on behalf of our clients.
Mhm,
So on behalf of a regulated bank, we are their vendor management partner, oftentimes
mm,
doing vendor due diligence for their critical vendors, their vendors that have access to data,
mhm,
et cetera. And so, that vendor review process can incorporate looking at anywhere from 2 to 4 dozen SOC reports for that organization, depending on the sophistication of that
mhm,
organization and the services they bring to bear, their business continuity reports, their financials, their policies and
mm,
procedures, all those things you would want to gather for a critical
mhm,
vendor if you're a regulated business. Well, we figured out ways to, I'm going to say, short circuit some of the review process. So instead of reading
mm,
a SOC report, 170-page SOC report to look for these 16 specific things, we
mhm,
can build an AI agent that
mm,
you then feed the SOC report to it, and it knows to go look for these 16 specific things and then tell us what page number it found it on.
mm,
And so now it produces the report back to, instantaneously in a few seconds to the analyst. The analyst now says, oh, okay, it found all 16. I know these controls are good. Now let
mm,
me go spot check a couple of these page numbers and make sure
mhm,
we're off and running on this. Or hey, it might find a management exception or a finding or something like
mhm,
that. Whatever we're looking for specifically, it can shorten that time to get
mm.
there. I use
That,
this, so Gleb, I use this a lot with my customers. I think of any administrative task as think
mm,
of it as a 10-mile journey. And what we mostly care about is the last mile. That's the
mhm,
intellectual capital of that journey. Whether
mhm,
you're an analyst, whether you're a loan originator, an underwriter
mhm,
at a bank, whatever that is, your real value isn't in the administrivia to get you that first 9 miles, but it's that last
mhm,
mile of activity. And so we're really focused in our clients and at ImageQuest at our own company of how do
mhm,
we take those 9 miles and take pieces of that and shorten that journey. So maybe
mm,
that 10-mile journey becomes a 6-mile journey or a four
mhm.
mile journey. We still care about the last mile, but if I can give you a jump start to a starting point, that's how I can make you more efficient.
So it sounds like in that example, you're putting in client data into the generative AI. How have you figured out which use cases will you be permitted to do so? And how do you, like, what's the approval process for getting some use cases approved for putting data into generative AI when you're using client data?
So, well, let me be very clear. We're not putting actual client data in there. So we're
Oh,
putting
okay.
vendor data in there, but
Vendor.
it's still
Okay.
someone's data. It's not ours. I
Yes.
get. So we're using a platform that's purpose built for this. So it is built in an AWS, Amazon Web Services private tenant.
Hmm.
The vendor that helped us put this together has SOC 2 compliance around that, has the
Hmm.
right common core trust principles around that. We have active monitoring of that. So we feel very good about the
Hmm.
platform. Data is encrypted in transit, encrypted at rest. And then we're leveraging the AIs of these large language models from Anthropic,
Hmm.
from OpenAI, from Google, from X, from Mistral, to then do the work in our private tenant. So we're not sharing data
Hmm.
out to any of these large language models. We're leveraging their AIs to use the tool to do the processing, but only in our
Hmm.
private tenant. So that's how we're
Hmm.
accomplishing that. And
Okay.
by the way, when we go to a client that wants to have these tools in-house, we're doing it the exact same way. We're building them a private tenant in AWS, leveraging
Hmm.
the exact same tools with the same processes.
Now, when you go to a client, they are, of course, not nearly as quick enough adopters as you as a tech company. So what kind of resistance have you seen among your clients to adopting generative AI tools?
Boy, that is a loaded question. So we've seen it all over the board, but I'm going to kind of put it into kind of three categories for you. So the first is I'm going to wait because I don't want to be an early adopter. I'm not afraid of AI,
Hmm.
but I'm going to wait until three or four of my peers do it and
Hmm.
I can watch and see what they do. And then I'm going to come up behind them and leverage their kind of first mover experience. So that's really nothing more than I'm going to be a little more cautious.
Hmm.
The second is, you know what? I am just scared to death of this and
Hmm.
I don't understand it. None of my other executives understand it. We don't have anybody here that can manage this. So I think the simple answer for us is to say no.
Hmm.
And maybe it's no for now, or maybe it's just no in their mind right now.
Hmm.
The third is the ones that they're more thoughtful and they're saying no, but they're also saying yes. So they're not saying no, I don't want AI. They're saying much
Hmm.
like we say to ourselves, hey, there are things we can do today that we
Hmm.
don't even have to worry about a regulator looking at this and asking us questions about it.
Hmm.
Let's talk about a bank specifically. So I can use the technology today to do administrative work that has
Hmm.
nothing to do with client data,
Hmm.
certainly has nothing to do with a decision process. That's where the regulators
Hmm.
are going to get in the weeds with us over AI is, are you using some type of a tool or an algorithm that's helping you make a credit decision, for example,
Hmm.
or helping you make any type of a decision that's verboten today. So essentially helping them figure out what are use cases that aren't
Hmm.
going to get them in any trouble with a regulator. So
Hmm.
rewriting every SOP in my bank. Banks are big on
Hmm.
standard operating procedure manuals, and
Sure.
I hundreds of
Sure.
them. They're going to list, hey, here's two we wrote last month, all the way back to here's, some that were written 20 years ago and everything in between. We can use AI, come up with the standard we like today. Maybe the two we wrote last month are the right standard for everything we want, today's look and feel. We can teach AI to take the other
Hmm.
150 and bring them up to speed very quickly.
Hmm.
Same thing with job descriptions is another great example where we can do that, where there's very little way for you to get in trouble with a regulator or an auditor when you're messing with
Hmm.
that type of administrative work. So again, that's hey, we're not saying no, we're saying no to anything that might get us in trouble, but we'll dip our toe in the
Hmm.
water over here with some things that might teach us how to use it and make us more efficient in the process.
Hmm. Now, I imagine, unlike you, where you're much more of a tech company, that a bank is not a tech company, and employees are certainly concerned about their jobs and job security. What have you seen in terms of job security and pushback around job security from employees who are reluctant to use generative AI because they're worried that it might replace them?
Yeah. You know what's interesting? I think about this, but never in the way you just asked the question. The only time I really hear that is when it's in the eco space. I read it on LinkedIn or I read it in an article in
Hmm.
the newspaper or I hear someone talking about it on a television news show. I haven't run into a case yet inside of an organization where employees are actually voicing that out loud. I'm
Hmm.
not saying they're not thinking it. I'm not hearing it though.
Hmm.
And I think what we're seeing and the way we're presenting AI isn't here's a way to grow your business and cut five jobs in the process. Here's a way that takes somebody who's already working really hard for 50 or 60 hours a week
Hmm.
and give them a tool to make them better at their job. Give them a
Hmm.
starter kit for a lot of these administrative tasks so they can be even more effective on your behalf. Now, will that have hopefully and probably the ancillary benefit of being able to scale faster without having to hire as quickly? Yes, but I don't see it as we're going to put some magic button in place where we push
Hmm.
that magic button and now I don't need these five employees anymore. I'm certain those cases exist, but I'm not seeing that in the white collar roles where we're doing our work.
I think the way when I work with financial institutions and other institutions that are working on generative AI adoption, the way it's expressed is not, I'm worried for my job. The way it's expressed is, this is too risky, or I don't need it, I could do my job fine, or this is ethically dubious. That's the way people express that concern in business speak, right?
Yes. Yes, that's fair.
That's what you generally see. Now, as we finish up, what do you think is going to be the situation with generative AI in a couple of years once people become more comfortable with adopting it? Like, and of course, generative AI technology itself is improving, agentic AI is coming on board. So, what's your vision for a couple of years from now when people are more comfortable and the technology improves?
Interesting. It's hard to think out a couple of years, right? How quickly this is changing. One
Yeah.
of my favorite quotes or sayings in the last year has become slowly then suddenly. I love that
Mm.
saying, and I think that's what we're seeing here.
Hmm.
And of course, last year, 2024 was going to be the year of. Now it's 2025 will be the year of. I get it. But for me personally, with what I'm seeing, and I'll give an example. There was a banking conference last week for one of the major banking core providers
Hmm.
in the community banking space. And almost every single presentation that was made had an AI overtone or undertone to it.
Mm.
And it wasn't fluff. It wasn't AI because that was the hot topic. It was
Mm.
actionable AI. Here are things that we either are bringing to you today. Here's a launch of
Mm.
what we're about to release to you with the next release, or here are things that were on our drawing board that are realistically coming to you in
Mm.
2025. And they're game changers in some cases. They're real
Mm.
world efficiency gains, and again,
Mhm,
brought to you by the software companies that are already doing the heavy lifting for these banks.
mhm,
So it comes to it through a regulatory lens. It comes to it through a
mm,
workflow, working with your existing software and
mhm,
tools lens. So I think we're going to see that quickly. And then the last
mm,
thing, and I'm very excited about this, you mentioned agentic. I believe that's going to be the next step. And I think it's going to happen so
mhm,
quickly that we're going to wake up one day here in 6 weeks and they're going to
mm,
be real agentic AI and you're going to be like, whoa, where did this come from? I think that's the real game changer. And for the audience who doesn't necessarily know what that means, that's literally turning these workflow tools that right now take a human to at least kick it
mhm,
off or start it to the agent. Literally, once you build it, the agent just does the work
mhm.
on your behalf. And I think that's some of the things I'm the most excited about in the next quarter.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Milton. I really appreciate you ex sharing your expertise and experience. That was very helpful.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you check out the show and leave a review. It helps other people discover the show, it helps us improve the show. And if you have any questions, email me at gleb, Gleb, at disasteravoidanceexperts.com.